Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. Joining me today, I've got a great guest for you. Bodyguard to the stars, including Whitney Houston, world champion karate, a 9th Dan, author of the book The Bodyguard, and Mr. Phil Moulton. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you for that outstanding introduction. Yeah, thank you.
How are you doing today? You all right?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Thank you. Yeah, it was the sun stopped shining over here, so yeah, we're all good. I'm sat at the bottom of my garden. I'm not an alcoholic. This is the bottom of my garden, so this is the man cave.
All right, Phil. So got quite a nice bit of stuff to get through there with your interesting background. But before we get into all that, can I just roll you back to the beginning, a little bit of sort of where you was brought up and sort of how your upbringing was, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So, excuse me. I was brought up in North Manchester, a place called Langley, which was a council estate. Like most council estates going back in those years, was quite rum, should we say? So I'm 63 this year. I'm 63 in August. So pushing the boat out a little bit. So North Manchester, Middleton. That's where I was brought up, and that's where I started doing all my karate and everything all those years ago, back in 1970 when I started karate. What
age was you when you first started, Phil?
I started when I was 10. I got into it. I mean, it was just becoming into the era of Bruce Lee. The old program, which was Kung Fu with David Carradine. And everyone wanted to be David Carradine. We were all walking around trying to pick up these pots and burning themselves, thinking we were Shaolin monks. But yeah, that's how I got into karate. I started learning from a book, strangely enough.
All right.
I couldn't afford the lessons because it was a hard estate. I come from a single parent. Obviously the funds weren't there all the time, so I had to do what I had to do to get the lessons.
How did you find that from learning from a book? You sort of self-taught?
It was difficult because in those days it wasn't like the pictures like the technology nowadays. It was like diagrams of put your feet here, put your feet there, and it was like he was doing karaoke, I suppose, line dancing. Until I found the karate class, which was in Middleton, and I joined that, and obviously the book went out the window, but I still carried on training myself. I couldn't afford an awful lot, Lee. So we used to make daft things like Makawari boards, which were made of pieces of plywood nailed to my neighbour's fence, which was, my neighbours weren't really happy about that. But as a young kid, I used to belt this piece of plywood and everything. And my punch bag was on like a scaffold, and it was an old post office bag. And you had to be careful where you hit it because it was a big buckle. So if you hit it wrong, you ended up bruising your hands. So I wasn't the smartest kid on the block, to be quite honest, at the first start. So I learned by the knocks and the bumps.
How did you find the first karate sort of led training, Phil? It's when you go in there, it's quite regimental, isn't it? It's quite disciplined.
It was massive. I can't remember my first lesson, but I can remember my first lessons going into this, and it was regimented. I mean, it's still the same now, but I remember going in and it was just packed. It was wall to wall with people. I've never seen so many people, and it was big, small, old, young, and it was the actual noise of everyone with the gis and they're doing the blocking and the punching. It was just an amazing atmosphere, should we say. And when we were doing the pad work and everything, and the kumite and everything, it was just an amazing atmosphere. It was like a sweatshop. Let's just say it was like a big sweatshop, and everyone worked really, really hard. There was none of this PC. You'd do your press ups on your knuckles, you'd lie on your back, and people would run across your belly. So it was quite rum, should we say, but it was brilliant.
I suppose back then as well, there weren't so many health and safety rules, was there, as there is today?
Oh no, there was no health and safety in those days. I mean, obviously everyone took care of each other, and but the pad work and the training that you were doing, I mean, you'd have like doing squats with people holding on to them, and then people doing press ups with somebody sat on your back. It was bizarre. On your knuckles and on your fingers, and they were pushing you down. It was just a real difficult. Well, it wasn't difficult. It was just a different way of training. It was the old way of training. Brilliant.
A little bit more hardcore back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. You know, I've got to admit, it was good. It was smashing. Yeah.
So, how did you progress through the karate years, Phil? You know, talk us through sort of how your career went with gradings and when you first started to compete and stuff.
Well, I started competing very, very early into my karate side of it, because where we were in North Middleton, there was a few classes that were springing up. Excuse me. So they would have like inter-club. It was like Kempo classes, and it was just like inter-class competitions and everything. So it was like a brawl more than anything. So there was no like referees. Everyone used to get on the mat and used to just like scrap like hell. So I progressed all the way through from, I mean, I started in 1970, and it took me a long time to get me to me first dan, because it was competing. I was doing all sorts of competitions, and I wanted to focus more on my kumite and my kata than I was my belt. I was still teaching though. I was teaching as a brown belt. So it was a difficult time, because I didn't have an awful lot of money. I still wanted to do the karate. So I was putting everything into the karate side of it. And then obviously as the club expanded, people moved on, etc. So we just worked with so many different instructors, some really good instructors, hardcore. So it took me about 10 years to get my dan grade. And then I decided to get it. And it was hard work. It wasn't like, I'm not saying it's easy now, but you had to put the time in. You had to be a referee or a judge at least. You had to go on all these courses all the time. You had to have so many competitions under your belt. So you had to be an active competitor. You couldn't just say, I've done karate for 5 years, I want a black belt. Your grading and your license, it was your record book. So from 80 to 84, I was on the SKU England squad, and that was brilliant for me, because I wasn't even a dan grade when I got into the squad. Yeah, I was a purple belt when I got into the SKU squad, and the guy that I beat was a second dan, and it was like a free for all in those days, and you really had to scrap. I know there's a lot of karateka around here, and they will go back and they'll sort of reminisce how it used to be. But it was a brilliant time. But you had to put the time in. There was no like shortcutting your gradings. You really had to put the time in, and they were very strict. So it was 5, 6, 7 times a week you were training, and you had to have that marked off as much as sort of say, well, I've got these lessons. It was completely different to what it is now.
So Phil, how did you get into the England team? Was there like a selection or fight-offs for that place? Or?
Yeah, it was the SKU squad. The head instructor was a guy called Stan Knighton. It was a massive bloke, not just in size, but also in presence. A fabulous karateka. Roy Stanhope, who was the head of the SKU at the time, and then he moved on to Chikara. I think it's Yukasco he went into. But what he had to do, he had to attend so many squad trainings, and then he had to compete. So the squad selection was made up from doing a load of running beforehand, so like a warm-up, then you do your line work, then you do your pair work, then you do pad work, then you do sparring, and then you'd have to fight for your spot. Yeah. So it went over a full day, so it wasn't just like, right, you're just rocking up. You had to really train, and it was hard work. It was hard work. You don't get into it straight away. I mean, you get some belts as well, and you come away with some thick ears and black eyes and all sorts of stuff. But to me, it was representing, you know, being on the squad and everything. It was brilliant, you know, and that was it really. Just being a member of the squad was good enough for me. I was more focused on getting into the side of the kumite and the international side of it. So, I mean, I just focused on training, teaching, etc. Even at such a lower grade, I always wanted to teach.
Where did that, obviously when you was in the England team, where did that take you? Did it take you to other countries and stuff, Phil?
No, not with the SKU squad, because it was quite a close squad. I moved on to another squad, which was the Tabasco, which was the Shotokan. So I trained with Shotokan lads. We went to Vegas, competed in the World Open All Styles in Vegas. That was a Shotokan competition, and I'm Shukakai, and I was ranked 4th. So I was quite pleased with that one. So we went all over with different competitions and different squads, etc. So we just travelled around every Sunday. Lee, you went to a competition every single Sunday. It wasn't like a Sunday off. Saturday was a preparation for the Kumite, and then Sunday you went off to wherever you was going. It could be anywhere in the UK. We travelled all over the place. So with the squad that we worked with and we trained with, it was just constant weekends. So on the Monday morning you were sore, but it was brilliant. It was a brilliant experience though, but the camaraderie, that was the main thing. It was, you know, like you're a martial artist yourself, you know, quite a qualified experienced one, so you know what that martial arts and camaraderie is, you know, and you can't get away from that really. So
what age was you competing in sort of England?
For the squad, it was only from 80 to 84. I mean, I didn't do a great deal on it, just attended all the training. So I was just a member of the squad, and they cherry picked the people that they wanted to pick, and it was always the same few. And that's why I fell off the thing, because I won't badmouth anyone, but that's how a lot of things are. You fit in or you don't fit in. For me, I was quite happy to train and go on the squad that I was with. So our squad was called Tokamru, and we just went round everywhere. We trained, we competed at every single level. So for me, it was just being part of the squad. Not competing wasn't really bothering to me, because I was still competing on our team, and that was good enough for me. I mean, we won loads of trophies. For me, it was all about developing, not just competing. It wasn't about just winning all the time. SKU nationals, Europeans, etc. So there was all sorts of things that we competed in.
Phil, obviously you're graded as a 9th dan now, which is very high. Can you just tell us a little bit about your qualification there and how many years it took to get there? Obviously,
I don't think you can see him at the back there. There's all my downgrades at the back. So my first dan, so I'll swing it round there. There's my first stands and all my downgrades there. So my first stand was in 1982, and then obviously you put the time in, and you have to wait that level of time before you can get your gradings. So my last grading was awarded, because obviously when you get to a 9th dan, I was awarded it. Yeah, so I got awarded my 9th dan in 2021. My 8th dan was 8 years before that, etc. 7 years, etc. So being awarded my 9th dan was probably the pinnacle. And I was awarded that by Charlie Gidley, who's Xian Charlie Gidley, who's a 9th dan from the JKA. I've been with Charlie's association, and that was the squad I was on. I was on their veteran squad I was a member of their team for 28 years. So we was part of the JKA, and he graded me from my 6th, my 7th, my 8th, and my 9th dan. Do you remember a guy called Danny Connors?
I don't actually know.
Danny Connors, Brian Seabright. I mean, I graded through them with Terry Pottage as well, Neil Fagan, then obviously Royston Hope, Stan Knighton. So my grading instructors were obviously very, very high instructors. But Charlie he's a 9th, and he's still alive now. He's poorly, so I don't want to really discuss that, because he's poorly, and that's why he got me 9th dan. Because obviously we had a bit of banter around it. I said, well, I'm not going to progress any further now because you're poorly. And he called me up and he said, Phil, we need to have a conversation. We had a chat, and he said, I want to award you this. You've waited 8 years, 6 months. So I think you put the time in. And during that time, I was still teaching, still doing what I had to do, helping out, refereeing, doing what I can do. So you still have to keep it in. You know, I'm really old-fashioned. And you know, that's where I am. So I still train, still stretch, and if I could compete, I would still compete. But we're not allowed to compete apparently. So yeah, that's me ninth dan. So I don't think I'll ever get to a 10th dan, Lee.
You never know, mate. You never know. Okay, Phil. So obviously you were just a bodyguard to Whitney Houston. How did you first get involved into the bodyguard work?
My first, if I go right back into my book, my first job was at the age of 16, believe it or not. It was my mum. Like I said, I was brought up in a very, very hard council estate, and there were a lot of bullies on the council estate. And my mum was a person who was sort of targeted by different people. Anyway, she was getting married to her fourth husband, so says a bit there. And then basically what happened, all these neighbours decided on my mum's wedding day to line up with buckets of horse manure. And what they were going to do when my mum come out, they were going to throw horse crap all over her. So I was 16 going on 17, and I went up and I spoke to them. I was only obviously a young kid at the time, and they've got a picture of me. And basically I went up to them and I said, "What are you doing?" And we had a bit of a to-do. So I said to the driver, and it was a white Cortina, I said to him, "Can you do me a favour? Can you back your car up onto the drive?" I'm a kid at 16, Lee. Just a little scrawny little kid. And everything I say is the truth, no bullshit. I'm sorry for swearing, but I had to emphasise that. Anyway, back the vehicle up, and I just said to my mum, "Just get in the car," and then I just walked to the side of her. And so she got onto the square, and then I got into the car and we went off. So my mum was the first person I ever looked after. But then from there, I was doing through karate, and he was a chap who was he was a detective inspector for the serious crime squads, and I think it was about 1980, 81. He was young, again a young whippersnapper, and he said to me, "You know, Phil, you make a good mind of you." Didn't have a clue what it meant, but it stuck in my mind. And then from there, I started progressing into different things, and then I just broke into the industry, doing bits and pieces, as I call it, bit of driving for people, looking after people. And then I went on a number of courses, and I decided to think, like, I was running a business at the time, and I thought, I want to get into this a bit more. So I ran a roofing company. I was still teaching karate. I was teaching karate 7 days a week. Well, it was 6.5 days if you go Sunday morning. And then from there, I just went into teaching close protection and then doing CP. So I went on a number of training courses, which were basically, they took the piss out. Sorry, they took the rip out of you. They said, "Oh, come on our course, you'll get loads of work. You pay loads of money, got nothing." Yeah. So I decided to break, and you've probably been down that route yourself, where you've attended courses. And I went everywhere on these daft courses, and people running around doing this and doing that. I'm thinking, this isn't real CP work or bodyguard work, whatever you want it to do. So I ended up just contacting people, and I've got a brown folder that I used to walk around with, and I've still got that brown folder now. And I went round knocking on all the hotels, and I said, "You know, do you want to do security? Do you need any security?" And that's how it started. So it was basically Granada Studios. I ended up looking after all the celebrities there. Did a load of back watching for camera crews. A lady called Vicky Standeven, and she used to do like the Pride of Britain and all other different events. So I do back watching on the camera crews, making sure that they weren't getting Miver, because there was quite a lot of Miver going around. We used to call it Gunchester, and there was a couple of occasions where the film crews were being targeted by some rum folk. So I'd get involved, and I'd just basically be there, just loitering in the background and just keeping an eye on things. And it just progressed from there, Lee. And from that position, it just sort of evolved. I started working with some other people, and the door started to open then. And, you know, lo and behold, people started asking me to do work for them. And it was 90, well, the first big one was Pele, was before Whitney Houston. I was doing the French foreign minister. Finished that. That was a 2-week job, and then got put onto another job, which was a 1-day job, which was an absolute nightmare. And then from there, Pele come in. So I was contacted by a friend of mine who ran a chauffeur company, and he said, "I've picked up this big celebrity, and I need somebody to keep an eye on." So I said, "Well, okay." So we ended up looking after Pele, and I put everything in place. And from there, it just sort of snowballed. And then people started asking me from there. That's how I got it. So I've never really advertised apart from doing the odd social media stuff. But 99% of my work has been through recommendations.
Yeah.
And you know, the Whitney Houston one was, I actually declined it originally.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I wasn't being Kevin Costner. I was looking after a corporate person who'd had a bit of a threat in his head, and basically the guy who was running the hotel at that time contacted me and said, would you come in and have a chat with us? And I knew what it was, and I said, I'm not interested, John. So he ended up going over, speaking to him, and there was 2 policemen there. I thought it was a bit heavy, this. Anyway, it was because obviously Whitney's partner was tagging along, and there was a bit of animosity going on, should we say, at that time. And part of her rider was that she had to have her own security. She brought her own team in, and we're still in contact with one of them now, called Tom LeBron. He's the director. He used to be the director of security for Whitney. And it was him who nominated me for the Cynthia Rothrock thing. Wow. So basically, we did all the security. She had her own private security with her, but because it was the Manchester area or the UK, they had to have somebody here. So my role was quite specific, and I had to keep Whitney and her husband away. They had to keep them apart. So he was on one floor and I was on the other floor, and we had to make sure that they didn't sort of interact. So I was like a bad smell following them around, and every time he got there, I had to sort of cast them the look. But you've got to sort of have that understanding. You can't really get involved with stuff like that. It's down to the manager, because the manager will say do this, but really don't want you to do that, I just want you to do this. It's a tick box, isn't it? So that's how it went for 4 days.
That's quite a long list of celebrities you looked after, Phil, as well, wasn't it? Would you be able to name a few for us?
Yeah, there was obviously Pele. I worked with Pele for 3 times. Eric Cantona, and it was a funny one. Eric Cantona and Pele. I don't know if you're a football person. Eric's a massive bloke. I mean, I'm 5'9" on a good day when it's windy, but Eric's a really, really tall bloke, and I couldn't get over the size of him. And I was working with him, and there was another chap from New York, Cosmos, whatever they're called, and he was ex-boat service. So I didn't know Pele was turning up. So when Pele turned up and Cantona was there, Cantona had given me a shirt for Pele to sign, and he said to me, can you get this signed from Mr. Pele? So I said, yeah, of course I can. I walked up and I said, hello, Mr. Pele, could I ask you to sign this shirt for me, please? And Pele looked at me, yes, of course. And he went, God, it's you. And he was hugging me. And this is the truth. In the Lowry Hotel in Manchester, 5-star, and he's jumping up and down in the mezzanine with me. It's great to see you. It's great to see you. And everyone's thinking, who the hell is this bloke? But I'd worked with him 3 or 4 times. And Cantona started laughing. He said, obviously, you know each other. So that was Cantona, that was Pele. I worked with the FA for nearly 12 years. Obviously, rubbed shoulders with all the rich and the famous, Mr. Beckham. Looked after Beckham a number of times under FA duty. And again, I was one of only 2 people in the whole of the UK trusted with the national team security. That was in the UK and overseas. So there was me and another guy called John. He ran from Birmingham down south, and I ran from Birmingham upwards. So every time the first team or the under-21s, all the ladies come into our area, I had the job of looking after them. So it took me everywhere. Went to Spain with them, Denmark, all over. So I've travelled quite extensively in my job. Other people I've worked with, looking round. Do you remember Hot Chocolate?
Oh, yeah, the singer. Yeah.
Errol Brown, I looked after him. Steve Keane, Russell Watson, looking at me, I think he's here now. All the football teams, Roy Hodgson, Sven-Goran Eriksson, Cleopatra. I worked with a number of pop bands as well. So I worked with Oasis, Rod Stewart, George Michael, Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm just looking at me, access all areas. So that was when I was running football teams as well. So we did all sorts of different things. Then the royalty side of it, I worked with His Royal Highness Prince Edward. That was in 2008. And that was what they call a fastball job, where it was a velodrome and it's a world cycling event. And I got a phone call from the general manager, And he said, Phil, can you help us? We're struggling. We need some security. So I said, what's the problem? He said, we've got a royal visit and I'll send you all these. I said, yeah, not a problem. So I went down, did the wrecker, did all the other bits and pieces. And the RASP team come up with the Royal Protection team. They turned up. Met a lovely guy called John Shepherd. I said, I've done this for you. He went, bloody hell, Phil, we don't need to do anything. You've done everything. But it's strange because we'd worked out exactly the same routes, the same safe areas. So I was with Prince Edward just for the day, and that was just supporting RASP. And then when I was on the Commonwealth Games, I ended up looking after him again, under the RASP again. Then Boris Johnson, other people I've worked with, Tashkin, which was a Thai Prime Minister. So I've worked with quite a few over the time.
How did you find the sort of celebrities? Were they all good, or did you get a few that are sort of think they're above themselves?
I can swear that one, can I?
Yeah.
I'll swerve that one. You know, Lee, the people, aren't they? I mean, I just look at people as people. You know, people get really, really starstruck with them. And I don't, sadly, because I just think, you know, you've employed me to do a job of work. You have some really, really smashing people, and you have some really bad people who, because we've got to remember that there's always two sides to a person. You'll have the public side and you'll have the private side, and you've never got to mix the pair of them, because, you know, when you're there, you're working with these people, and there'll be things that you see, you know, people are crashing down and fed up and everything. You work with people yourself, and you see that, and you've got to be there sometimes. You're not there for a pillar to lean on, but you're there just in case you need a bit of a sounding board. A lot of it's down to discretion as well. You do get some really, really smashing people, and you get some really bad people who talk to you very, very poorly, should we say, as though you just hired help. And I've had that, and you just suck it up and get on with it, really, because it's just a job. One of the guys that I did look after was Martin McGuinness from the Sinn Féin, from the IRA. That was a bit of a strange one, should we say. That was back in 2001. That was from government. They'd asked me to do the job, and basically what had happened was he was coming in under his official banner as education minister. He was coming over to Warrington, where the Warrington bomb was, and he met the two parents of the kids that got killed. So my role was as bat watcher. Obviously he had his own people, the police were all over the show, but my job was to stick with him and make sure that he was bat watched, should we say. So that was a very surreal job, but you do the job, don't you? Yeah. One of the jobs that I missed out on, Lee, was his Holiness the Pope.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was. It's all documented. A friend of mine is called Bill Miller. He was my mirror on the under-21 squad, and His Holiness had come into the UK. I think it was 2008, and he said, "Can you come down to London?" And I said, "Yeah, of course he can." And I'll send you the screenshot of what he sent me. And it was just a day's job, just basically making sure that everything was all tidied up and everything. But I've had a variety of jobs. So mine is not just about bat watching. We did a lot of investigation work. And I do an awful lot of investigation when I do CP work, cross protection. I do counter surveillance, bug sweeping. So I actually do that on all the jobs that I do.
Phil, is there any jobs you've had to do that are high risk that you know before you've taken that job on, this could go pear-shaped? Do you do sort of investigation into that type of stuff? Or
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's two sides of what I've done early. Obviously, the celebrity side, which is all pretty, and then I've done what I call the dark side, which is witness protection. We looked after a lady for nearly 8 months. Her husband was lifted. He was kidnapped. He was never found. We were working with the police. I've got to be careful what I say. But it was an active job. I'll tell you more off record, but that was a very, very active job, and it involved the Middle East. So we did get warned off by the police to basically just say, be careful what you do. So we had to work very, very closely with them. And the other side of it is witness protection stuff. As we mentioned, it was called Gunchester. Don't know why, because every city in the UK has got gun problems. So I work with the Arsebold team, and we set up the witness protection program. And basically what it was, I attended court one day, and I said, how do you get these witnesses to court? And they just told me the principle. I said, can I write something? So I wrote a document, wrote something about it. And some of these people that we went to court against, Lee, were very, very rum. You know, from like London, you've got the East End, you've got all sort of gangsters from everywhere in the world. So we had a number of areas. So we had to do all the risk assessments, the threat profiling, everything. We had to work with the police on a constant basis. So that was an enjoyable job because, you know, when you're working with celebrities, you're just there as part and parcel. But when you're looking after a person who's had a real death threat, and I'll be honest, we've had death threats on jobs probably about once a week. If you ever speak to my wife Nadia, we'd had to deal with these death threats. So they get a phone call. They had to do due diligence where we'd have to put the things in place to make sure that everything was done, speak to the police, put the security in place, do all the risk assessments and everything. So it was quite, should we say, heavy, but it was rewarding because people, you know, you'd get up in the morning, they'd say, that's the first night's sleep we've had for 6 months.
I suppose as well, in that sort of situation, Phil, you're a little bit like a sitting duck because they know who you are, but you don't know who's could be coming for you, do you?
No, that's, I mean, that, you know, at the end of the day, when we used to do jobs like that, it would have been more ideal. Again, it's all budget, Lee. Everything that we do is it's about, we've got to justify what we do. So there was a point where we were in the premises and I had people spotting from the outside to find out if we were being targeted, because we had to build up a case as well, because it's not just about doing security. We had to build up a court case so it could be presented to like CPS. So basically we would be providing evidence. So there was a number of cases where we would put probably like counter surveillance on people. We would be watching the people who are watching us. And those are the sort of things that we were implementing off our own back sometimes, because we had to make sure that the people who were inside the house were looked after, not just the witnesses, but also the security staff. So you are sitting ducks. And when you go to court, and you go to court with some of these people, you know that they're known. They're gangsters and they've got a reputation. We can't carry anything here in the UK. We can't carry a firearm, we can't carry a baton, can't carry no type of weapon. So when you go into court, there was a case where we went to court and it was a quite heavy gang. I won't mention the gang. And basically, as we got to court, we had the armed police there. The police were our backup because we're not allowed to do anything. And a gentleman who was working with me at the time, and he was sweating, ex-armed forces, and he was really stressing out. He said, I'm not used to this, because obviously in the forces, as a policeman, they were allowed to carry a sidearm or at least a baton. And you know, we've just got to get on with a wry smile and get on with it. It's not just witnesses. I've worked with footballers and football players and managers, etc., who've also had threats, because you know yourself in football, it's very, very the first time I went to a football match, I was shocked. You know, how people react and how people behave, and death threats. We looked after a certain manager and we had to fly up to his house in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, because he'd been ousted out the club, but he'd had death threats. So they have to put things in place, and you don't think that really exists. But it does, and it's true. You know, these things do happen on a regular basis. It just doesn't happen, you know, you don't get all the news. I mean, I suppose nowadays it'll be a little bit more differently because people have got the mobile phones. And we was also talking about football players and football managers receiving the threats. It's very difficult to understand that people would take that mentality to threaten people. You know, pop stars, we know how many pop stars who we know will get stalked. Is because basically they get it all the time. You know, and then they think, oh, we need security. You should have had security in place beforehand. We've dealt with a number of people who've been stalked. I've worked with people who've undergone that. And it's not, you know, it's very, very unnerving for them, because it's that unpredictability when you don't know when they're going to pop out. Football clubs. We had one football manager who was particularly hated by a number of people, and I won't disclose his name. I may do offline. But on one occasion, he was confronted by a fan, as you know, and I had to come in and to deal with the fan. I mean, the threats. I mean, the poor guy had gone grey, you know, with the fear and the shock and everything. So we've had some really, really bad threats, and people don't realise, and you think it's a bit of a laugh and a joke, but when somebody's saying they're going to hurt you, that's a bad thing. I've had a machete pulled on me. Right. That was in Moss Side. I was looking after a probation officer at the time, and basically the woman had come in. She was a lady, and she threw a big brick at the window, and basically shattered the glass. Then there was two people sat in the reception room as though nothing was happening. It's like a scene from Morecambe and Wise. And I run out and I dragged them into the ante room and locked the door. And we chased the woman out, put the thumb lock on, spoke to the receptionist, called the old bill. The next thing, she produced what I thought was a piece of metal, and she started hitting into the cars. I thought, it's not a piece of metal, it was a blade. And it was a machete. It must have been around about, it was a big machete. Oh, so she hit this car, and I said, are the police on the way? She's got a blade, she's got a knife. This was 2001. I actually opened the door. The guy behind me, he come behind, locked the door, and they chased her. When the police come and they obviously arrested her at a later date because she vanished. She was only small, but she was white. She was a smiling lady, and basically she was hitting trees, and it was bizarre, an absolute bizarre thing. And to this day now, if you ever speak to Nadia, she still moans at me. She said, "Why did you chase her?" And the policewoman said exactly the same. And Lee, I can honestly say, hand on heart, I don't know. There was kids out there, there was people out there, and I thought, this woman's, she's ballooning.
Be taken down, otherwise she's going to hurt someone.
And they just basically run at her, and she run off, and she disappeared. She did knock two policemen out though in the court.
Really?
Yeah, and it wasn't finished there. She come back and firebombed the place.
God, blimey.
Yeah, she firebombed it. Because I met Angela a couple of weeks later after the job had finished, and she said she'd come back, derobed herself, and then firebombed the location. Been firebombed about 3 or 4 times in different locations. Look after witnesses. I've had a syringe pulled on me. So you've had all sorts of things, and we're not allowed to carry anything.
That just goes to show you as well, there, Phil, that you can never judge people by what they look at. I mean, you might look at a big geezer with all tattoos and think, oh, he might be trouble, but then you've got a lady there that could do equally as much damage trying to firebomb the place and stuff. So,
well, that's perfectly true. That, you know, it's one of these things where people don't realise how people flip, and they do very, very quickly. In court, we've seen it in court where people just go boom. And you're looking after a witness, you're looking after a celebrity, and somebody will just pop. You know, it's unpredicted. You could do all the profiling in the world, and you do all the planning in the world, but the thing is, people are so unpredictable, so you can never plan for that. You've got to constantly plan for everything that you do. You know, and it's about the planning that makes the job either fail or, you know, pass.
So, Phil, I just wanted to move on a little bit. So, obviously, you actually teach this sort of work now, don't you? Close protection work. So
yeah,
what's sort of the difference between sort of the close protection work and the martial arts itself as a traditional form?
Well, the close protection thing, I actually wrote the first course in 1999, and I got it accredited for a company called GMOCN. So it was a national course, and what I did, I actually implemented it as a civilian-based course. Because people say, do you have to be a martial artist? Do you have to be military? Do you have to be ex-police? No, you're working in a civilian industry, in a civilian arena where you don't have to go. Martial arts and karate and everything. It's funny because I'll send you this picture in a bit. My wife's been badgering on at me about doing a tree. I always thought she was calling me boring, but she said, you're like an oak tree because you've got branches everywhere. And it's funny when you look at the bottom of it, she said, put where you've come from, and the basis has come from my karate.
Yeah.
And it's given me that discipline, the focus, the awareness, and everything else. And Steve Keane, who wrote the foreword in my book, he actually said, and obviously if you read the book, it says, Phil had like a sixth sense, and everyone used to laugh at me because they'd come in, they'd check this, they'd do that. And it's that awareness that you develop. And I think a lot of that does come from karate or your martial arts. Because remember when we were doing kumite, did you do Muay Thai? You did Muay Thai, didn't you?
Yeah, I started with karate as a kid and then went on to the
Yeah.
full contact stuff later on, yeah.
Yeah. So your awareness and your developing, your sensibility of what's gone on has come from how switched on you were. You know, normal people will just walk around where you'll see a lot of karate people and they've got this air about them. It's not arrogance. It's just they're a little bit more confident in what they're doing. It's not a swagger. You know, I always get told off because I'm very quiet. People have never heard of me because I don't go around. I've just started talking about what I've done over the last couple of years because I'm getting too old now and I need to start earning something a little bit different. But karate has actually made me to what I am. I said that in my book, I said that in my little documentary, and it's made me the person that I am today as a close protection person. And I'm really proud to say that I've never had to put hands on a person.
A couple of other things I wanted to touch on, Phil.
Yeah.
You also held the world record for the most tail breaking.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it come from two things. Well, it come from three things, Lee. The first one was a lady who had leukemia, and it was coming to Christmas, and she didn't have an awful lot of money. And so I decided I was going to do something daft, as I normally did at my karate class. So I brought 200 towels in 30 seconds with my hand. And then that was just for a bit of fun to get money for her. And then the next thing was the Bosnia, which is the one that's on YouTube, which you actually see me breaking them. And that was 872 in 75 seconds. But the world record was 950. And I broke 1,025 in 90 seconds.
Oh, mate.
So I'd broken with my hands and my feet. I'd thrown me back out a couple of days before, and what I anticipated to do was like punch through him or smash through him with my hand. But he ended up pulling me back out, unloading the tiles, having a glass back. So he had to stamp through so many of them and then punch through the rest of them. But we did 1,025 in 90 seconds. That was for Blue Peter for the leprosy appeal.
Yeah.
I didn't get a badge.
Didn't get a Blue Peter badge?
Didn't get a Blue Peter badge. We sent it off and everything. But a gentleman afterwards, he actually did the event as a demonstration, and he was part of the crew. So he got something from it anyway, but we didn't. But it was just we helped the people in India, and we got a little bit of money to them as well. So that was good enough for me.
Also, Phil, you like we've mentioned a couple of times, you're an author now of your own book. So can you just talk us through a little bit about your book?
Yeah. Well, the book took me 10 years to write, Lee.
Oh, really?
Not that much slow. I'm not that much slow writer. Basically, what I used to do was I used to run a big business. I ran a massive security business which employed 300 people, and we lost it overnight. £1 million business gone. Won't go into the reasons why, but there is another story to that one. So what I did, I actually wrote the book as to audit myself. So it was like little snippets of my life, etc. So every time me and Nadia went on holiday, it was a standing joke where I would go to a shop and I'd get like a writing book and I'd sit there and scribble. And then I ended up, and it was Jason Roberts and Rocky Santa Cruz, the two footballers. I'd looked after Rocky because Rocky's wife was really, really held up. And I said, why do you put it into a book? So I actually put it into a book, and then a smashing guy called Ian McHarg, who's an ex-commando sergeant major, I think he was, apparently one of the most feared PTIs in the Royal Marines. He contacted me and he said, Phil, I'd love to do a book. And he actually sent it over to her, and within 4 months, he turned it around into a book. He had to obviously phone people, verify the jobs and the stories that I was telling people, but it come out in 2018. I've probably given more away than I've actually sold, but I'd like to get it out there one day and do a good talk on things. I've done a number of speaks, but that's one of me. I would say one of my big ambitions actually to go out and basically tell people, you know, bullies out there, you know, you can overcome it, you can do anything. I was a kid with holes in my shoes and plastic bags around my feet, and that, you know, smelly little kid from Langley, and I made it to what I am now. You know, anyone could do it.
As we touch on there, Phil, can I just ask you, have you got any sort of words of advice for anyone that would sort of want to go down the same path as you with martial arts or security work? What sort of advice could you say to them?
Yeah, for the martial arts side of it, never give up. Because you know yourself, martial arts and karate, especially traditional karate, it's not an easy sport. It's like Marmite, you love it or you loathe it. This is my 53rd year and I love it. But it doesn't mean I'm just stayed at karate. I don't just do the blocks and the punches. I do throws, kicks and all sorts of stuff. But just stick at it. It is rewarding, and it can give you a massive discipline and lead you somewhere else. It's led me all over the world, Lee. I've won a world championship, European championships, I've broke world records, etc. So I've done an awful lot with my karate. That's what's made me. For the close protection side of it, people tend to go into this little barrel and just think, I want to be a bodyguard. You've got to think outside the box. Really, you've got to think, and it's finding that niche. The niche market is where people will want you, because there's that many people doing close protection nowadays. When I first started, there wasn't many, but nowadays there's millions of people doing it. And it's all about the guns and the running around and everything. If you pull a firearm out, you failed. It's about the planning, prevention, put things in place. Remember, you're not going to be the most popular person when you do close protection. You can't take it personal, because you're there to do a job of work. And there's all sorts of things. You can do surveillance, counter surveillance in close protection, anti-stalking. I mean, I've done so many different aspects of CP in my career. Like I said, sweeping for bugs for the FA. That was one of my big jobs. I used to go around and do bug detecting and everything, sweeping area. So never give up, but find your own niche. If you're going to go training, find a trainer who's got experience. It doesn't matter about the certificates on the wall. They mean nothing. Obviously they do, because you've done the course, like I said the other day. But it's having that experience where you can say, I've done this. What do you think about that? Because you're putting life skills into it. Like when you fight in the ring, you can say you can do it this way, you can do it that way. But if you've got no experience in the ring, you would never know how to coach somebody. So it's having that adaptability where, you know, you're teaching from life experience rather than from a book. People come on my course. I've trained nearly 3,000 people. From London, there's a guy called Jerry Judge from Music and Arts. Jerry ran all London. He did all the Leicester Square. Jerry come on my course back in 2006. Malcolm Conley, a lovely friend of mine, who's still working with Johnny Depp. Paul Medley, who does Gary Barlow. So all these people have come through my courses. You know, and you know, I'm really proud of people, what they've done, and I'm still proud to say that I still do the job. One of my last jobs was the under director to United Nations, Kofi Annan. So again, a kid from Langley. So anyone can do it. You've just got to have that discipline, and you've just got to basically go for it and have that faith in you.
Cool. Phil, just going to throw a couple of random quick questions at you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Favourite karate technique?
Washigera, roundhouse kick.
Favourite kata?
Nisei.
Favourite sweep?
Ashibarai, running sweep.
When you was a kid, sort of growing up, was there anything you dreamed as that you wanted to be that you didn't get to do if you hadn't begun down a path of martial arts and security?
I always wanted to be a lumberjack.
A lumberjack, yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I always wanted to get into scuba diving. That was one of my things, but I'm claustrophobic because I can't do that. I've tried that. But I think finding martial arts at a young age, at the age of 10, there is no other way I was going to go, in fairness. I won't do football at school. I rebelled at school. I never went to school.
I hated football.
No, well, football, they used to make me run around in pink bloody shorts. Sorry, they used to wear me, you know, like these shorts, and you had to wear them, and they had all sorts of coloured dye on them, and any type of coloured crap they put on you to make you look stupid. So in the end, they give up, and they said, "Yeah, you can do karate." And it's funny. There's a guy on my LinkedIn contacted me. He said, "I remember you, Phil, because you were that obstinate that you actually said, 'I'm not doing that,' and they ended up letting me do karate." And nearly got put in social care because I never went to school. I was always at the dojo, and the WAG officer knew exactly where I was going to be. So don't lead by my example.
So Phil, is there anywhere people can find you or get in touch with you if they're interested in training with you, or your book, or your close protection? Where can people find you?
I'm obviously on Facebook and LinkedIn. I do have a website, but it's crashed at the moment. I did it myself, and it's a really cool name. It's The Bodyguard. So it's the -bodyguard. So I'll try and get that one back up. I mean, but my phone number's there if people want to phone me or email me, or just get me on LinkedIn and Facebook. You know, I'm happy to. And the thing about me, Lee, is I'll pick the phone up and I'll talk to people.
Yeah.
Rather than messaging people. People message me and whatnot. I'll pick the phone up and I'll start talking to people. And it's, you know, it's a bizarre thing. People go, "Oh, you're phoning me?" Yeah. Well, I'd rather speak to you than rather than messaging you, because at least I can hear your voice and I know you know, sincerity.
Okay, Phil. All right, we're starting to wind it up there. Thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been appreciated listening to your story. Thank you.
I could have rambled on for a lot longer, but I don't want to put you to sleep.
All right, Phil. Thanks for coming, Phil.
All right, bless you. Stay well, keep safe.